Welcome.
Yo, my name is Christian. Just to give you a quick background, my most notable game project that some of you might know is Through. We've been exhibiting here before the Maze also, which was this, for who doesn't know, this Kinect Xbox One platformer. And now the way I got to this project is that I just moved to Berlin last year to try to get away from entertainment games and do installations or anything that, to try to express myself somehow with this technology I was using. And that was my seed to be here.
I'm Jessie. I'm an artist. I've looked forward to this talk for a long time. It's a different audience and it's very exciting to me. I'm a bit nervous. So, for me, this project came about when the Volksbühne, controversial arts institution here in Berlin, offered me a commission to make something, and they offered me an online commission, and I was immediately like, oh, because I'd sort of come through post-internet art, and I wasn't sure about the context. So I thought that online, you either have to make a one-line joke that it's immediate and very kind of simple, or else you have to draw people in. So there has to be this time-based element. So I thought about a video game, and I don't know how to make video games, so they match-made me with Christian. This is just some sculpture and drawings that I've made before. I got stuck on the idea of Batman as a kind of saint of the modern. So he kind of, some version of Batman shows up in the game, but we'll get to that. So that's how we started, I guess. So, because I'm just going to say this stuff, because this was my, it was originally, like, there was a kind of very skeleton concept that I had that we then started developing. And I started thinking about the idea of the Bardo, which is not quite the Underworld. You can all read that now, what it says up there. So the Bardo is Sanskrit for the intermediate state, transitional state, in-between state, or liminal state. So it's the state of existence that's intermediate between lives on earth. So it's not quite like hell, which is the Christian idea. It's more like purgatory. And then, of course, there is the Christian text, Purgatorio, which is Dante, which I was also thinking about. And the thing is about the Bardo and the in-between thing is, I was thinking that we now are coming to the end of something with Trump, Brexit, the rise of various factions in Europe. Felt like Europe is having a hard time admitting that it's about to die, that white modernity is on the way out. And I thought, maybe for these characters, their problem is that they don't know they're dying, they don't know they're already dead. And in both Christian and Buddhist and Hindu myths, you end up in the Bardo when you haven't done the work, you're not ready to go yet, you're sort of stuck in between. And I thought this is like maybe somewhere that we find ourselves. So that's the basic, that was the kind of like philosophical space. And so these are kind of like visions of like how the Bardo has been pictured, Tibetan Buddhists, and this is Dantes Inferno, the mountains of hell, etc. And I thought they looked a lot like, next slide, these images which show urban sprawl. So you have the old style modern city, and then you have the sprawl, like where it just keeps on growing out, and it's not one thing or the other, it's just in between, purgatory. And so I was thinking about this in the context of, next slide, also video games, that they also have this aspect of, the map, which kind of, this is GTA, one of the GTA cities. I'm sorry, I'm not really a gamer, stopped at Monkey Island. And this is Zelda. They also have this quality, I thought, of this kind of like radiating underworlds. So, next one. Finally, for the philosophical background, if you are gamers and game developers, you'll understand that the idea of free will in game design is only ever it doesn't really exist. You always need an integer, you know. So I was thinking about this is twine. The idea that you make a decision and the decision leads to a kind of destination. That's just a basic principle of game design, website design, right? But it's also a basic Christian principle, and other religions, where you make a decision, you do something, and then this affects where you're going, as in hell or heaven, or being stuck in the afterlife. So this is where our Bardo is set. We went through what's it called? Street View, in a bit of a deep dive, in walking along these paths. So this is London, Berlin, and Palo Alto, where Google is set, or lives, or exists, or whatever. And this is between the old airport, a disused airport, or a war airport, and the IKEA. And this is basically the site of urban sprawl and indeterminate, no one thing or the other, like no man's land. And it's also kind of like like planes, the modern IKEA, the hyper-modern, late capitalist kind of purgatory, right? So that's where we get these images from. To you.
What was amazing about this project is that I was already, from my programmer's perspective, somehow I was in love with these like machine learning algorithms. I love this like style transfer shit, and although the results were kind of impressive, at the same time, if you look at these generated pictures from let's say artistic or quality perspective, actually realize they look surreal, just bad. It's recreating a pattern. But I somehow was, before I started this project, I was trying to think about how to generate game content with machine learning algorithms, for example. Like, if somebody's not familiar, this is a style transfer algorithm applied with, so this left image is being fed into this algorithm as a style, and the second picture is basically this image of Berlin, and it tries to repaint this picture using this now wood etching style, right? And yeah, what was really funny is that, like, with the setup of the Bardo and the definition of this space of the in between of a memory, of a illusion of life, if you want to say it, that all of a sudden this art style that usually is not directly usable or just doesn't look really comfortable fits perfectly into this environment, because it is like the Bardo. These are applying this kind of style it kind of removes you from the picture. I feel like, if you take a picture of something like your room and you see it in color, you can still kind of feel the soul of the picture, right? And in the moment you put this like style transfer algorithm on top of it, you can still recognize it's your room or Berlin or whatever, but you're completely removed from the image. And I think what really fit well was that, like, this is how I imagine the in-between world, the ghost world to be. It's if they're traveling through Berlin, they're not traveling through actual Berlin, but a memory of Berlin, a soulless depiction, recreation of past impressions, so to say.
This little picture, so this is an image from the game, and this is the small image is Gustave Doré, who's the guy who did the etchings for all of Dante's Purgatory and Inferno. And Dante it was this great kind of epic poem all about some bro who goes to the underworld, and come back to him in a minute. But basically, so we styled London, Berlin, or Croydon, Berlin, and Palo Alto on the etchings of Doré, which means that they're all quite different places. So California looks quite different to Croydon in terms of its light. But now, because of the algorithm, we kind of flattened them all out, and we sort of manually, algorithmically generated a kind of generic purgatorial sprawl. So yeah.
So yeah, the amazing process was that Jesse went through actually Google Street View and traveled down these IKEA roads and took the...
Yeah, walking. It took hours and hours. It made me car sick.
Yeah, and then yeah, we ran through this trained algorithm after trying out some different styles, and we kind of decided that any kind of machine-generated content or AI-generated content is, if it's a visual, if it's text, if it's sound, it all fits the same description of this imitation of this surreal, real, but not the real thing. So we thought it was perfect to generate all the content of the game with these kind of algorithms. So right now, the version you can also play in the exhibition basically just shows you the the visual direction, so to say. We have like all the backgrounds styled, and you can walk through this through the city. But basically, we will add other layers of content that, for example, just advertisements, machine-generated, or narratives, or poems.
Because obviously in this kind of like junk space, sprawl suburb, there's lots of billboards, there's lots of text, and we thought, well, there's no point in buying anything in the underworld. So IKEA shows up a lot, obviously, but we thought about taking the text on the billboard and basically every time you play the game, even though there's no free will, so it's not like you can really, it's also not a very complicated game in terms of its, journey. But when you make a decision, you still end up in the same place, which is, how life works maybe, or at least given a certain philosophy. But there are certain integers that you'll supply, for example, your player name, and the answers to some questions, like there'll be some conversations, we're working on that will change the environment. So the billboards will say something different to you. Or, Yeah,
the idea is basically that the gameplay, so to say, will be that, the characters in the game, they are ghosts, so they have no actual individual personality or like a being, so to say, which the player is providing. So basically we will ask the player some kind of input. For example, maybe the two characters walking through the scene have a conversation about, are you afraid of the dark, or what did you want to be as a child? And it's going to be a free-form input, so to say, from the player. And this input is again then fed into some AI generator to, for example, generate some text on a board, or to generate a poem at the end, to generate a riddle at the end of a chapter, for example. And yeah, we're kind of just like chaining. Let me see if I can get this running. We're kind of just like chaining different kind of algorithms that are available on the internet, or that we need to train ourselves to just make this whole thing feel like almost like a picture book of realizing your own goals of the player. That although this whole world is completely soulless, the few distinctive things are coming from the player actually, and are really recognizable. Let's say we ask the player, what are you afraid of? Let's say the player, let's say the darkness. And yeah, this poem generator we found, it actually comes up with like decent poems, decent enough for what we're using them for. So this is just like one example of how we're going to use the user's input again or the player's input to fill content back into the game.
And for me, it's kind of not just random, but so thinking about what is a life worth, back to this modern philosophy. I'm not a scholar, but I was thinking about the end of the modern, in terms of like how could we understand the world philosophically if we were understanding it completely differently, can go back to those guys. And I was thinking about, you know, what's a life worth is, you know, the memory and basically, you know, the mirror. And you have these in all the myths of hell as well, is what you face is yourself. And so in terms of this algorithmic content, which is essentially provided by the user, they are also given a mirror for themselves. Also not a very sophisticated mirror, but then again, we were thinking that maybe God is an algorithm as well, you know, a very sophisticated one with a lot of user-generated content. Just quickly, these are the guys, it's Virgil and Dante, and they are in Dantes Inferno, Virgil's this guy, this poet who just shows up and takes him through and leads him around. So those are the bros, as realized by Doré. And then, next slide, we came up with these two figures, the Batman and the Ghosts, who should be sort of interchangeable, kind of genderless, and they as well are kind of just stuck together. And so the point of that is, you know, they talk to each other, but they're really just a mirror for the other, which is maybe how relationships are as well, you know. There's a lot of secret philosophy in there. Anyway, yeah. And we are on like 5 minutes now, so this slide just to say, when we finally finish it, these billboards are going to be walking away from you into the distance. We will animate them, and they're, you know, the billboards become kind of sentient because they're one of the only things that speak as such. But maybe we could really, really quickly open it to questions, like for about 5 minutes, 2 minutes. Anybody? Nope. It's pretty early, sort of. Okay, so got a conclusion?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the finished game. So far, there's been I gave up on games before. I thought I wouldn't be able to express myself at all, and I almost completely kicked away games out of my life. And now through this collaboration, all of a sudden I feel very invited to all of a sudden pour out my whole inner blabber into a game, and it's an absolute wonderful process so far. And very unexpected.
Well, thank you very much for listening.